Well, happy Tuesday. Oh my goodness. Dr. Laurie Davis here, host of the Dr. Laurie Davis Show and broadcasting from the Disability Channel, streaming right now on the Laurie Davis Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel, Laurie Davis Show host. Over to you, Ramin. Good morning, or rather, good afternoon for me, good morning for you. So, hello.
Hello. Yes, it is a good morning. Happy Tuesday to everyone. I hope it's been a wonderful week so far. And hopefully, winter is on its way out for quite a few of our audience. I know it's been very cold in
Oh,
north, and yeah. So,
well, let's start with a weather report.
okay.
Yesterday, woke up minus 32 degrees Celsius, but no wind. So that really helps.
That's
That really
good.
helps. And no snow, sunny. If you're sitting inside, you think it was summer.
Oh,
But
good.
here we are, yeah, in Alberta, minus 32, minus 25 this morning. So it's actually warming up. How are things in California weather-wise?
Oh, it's overcast. We're gonna have some rain. I'd be welcome that in a couple of days, and hopefully not too much that affects obviously the burned obviously areas. But yeah, it's nice. I mean, I cannot complain. After the reports that you're giving me, I've learned to just be very appreciative.
Yeah, but I'm going to be, in all fairness to you, I'm going to say to you, some of the weather that you've received in the last while, I'm not interested.
Okay, yeah.
I don't want fires. I don't want wind. I don't want the Santa Anas. I don't want, yeah. Ooh. I don't want mudslides. I don't want earthquakes.
Well, now you're telling me I'm gonna move to Canada after
Yes, you are. You're going to be a Canadian. Yes, you are. That's in the future. We know that. All right. So, we have to. I don't know if the tariffs would be part of your topic today, but we got a big scare. Um, and all of a sudden, all these Facebook sites were showing up, buy Canadian, made in Canada, what's Canadian, what's US, blah, blah. And then the whole thing fell apart like a $3 watch when the tariffs didn't take place. I mean, I actually saw videos of liquor stores out east, hiring extra help, removing all the American liquor. They were removing Jack Daniels, and I went, oh, my nephew's going to be upset about that. And, when I have wine, it's Carlo Rossi white from California. I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to have to find a wine from British Columbia that I really like or some other vineyards. And our good friend Sylvia Somerville said to me, well, Laurie, Niagara Falls, Niagara's famous for its wineries. Okay. But I don't know that I can ever replace that taste. So we did a show yesterday, Sylvia and I, it was very funny, on a personal level, how it's impacting us as seniors. So can we spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes talking about the tariffs, the decisions that were made, then relinquished, and then Chinese, and they retaliated, and the markets, so how is that affecting everything? So can you give us kind of a little synopsis of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think what I was thinking for today was basically talk about immigration,
Yes.
politics, and tariffs and put them all together.
Okay.
As you know, in our show, what we try to do, we work on facts,
Yes.
history, but also personal experience. And I think that what makes it uh, more interesting and authentic because it's about our own life experiences. So that's what I was going to devote our time today. But before I
Perfect.
do that, today is a very special day for me. February 4th, 1985, as a 23-year-old, actually, I started my business, my financial services. It's a
Oh my
40th
God.
anniversary is today, so it has to be timely. And I was sharing, I just
Is
have
that the 40th anniversary?
yes, my 40. So this
Oh,
is,
look
I
at
was
this.
sharing, that was my company's logo. I was showing my letterhead to my son. I said, can you
Oh,
believe this? 40 years ago, I made this. And I had Modiri Financial Services, not knowing I'll be
aw.
sitting here talking to you 40 years later. So I'm very honored. It's been a fantastic journey. So anyway, so it's a special day to be here. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of put different things together. I'll start with
Yeah.
tariffs,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then
maybe just give us a personal update
absolutely the
on what's
tariffs.
going on.
So one of the things we have to be wary of, and the good news is we have access to so many resources, is where the information is coming from, because
Yes.
there's a lot of emotional reaction. And
Yes.
as you said, the markets, Sunday night, of course, the markets open in overseas. We got Australia, Japan, China, Hong Kong. They're all opening, and then you see this movement, and then of course overnight it's happening. I'm watching the dollar. I'm watching, basically what is happening to stock futures, and Europe didn't budge that much. It was really interesting because they thought they're immune. So um, the idea is the markets overreact regardless of what happens, because the idea is let's get our things out first and then we will see how we can digest. One of the things our audience have to be careful with is, first of all, we have this recency bias. We look at things like what happened just a few minutes ago. So we don't look at what history has done to learn from that. And unfortunately, again, with so much media at work, everything is instantaneous. So we have this emotional reaction. So for me, actually, it was a busy day. Monday was a busy day of trading. And the reason for that is that understanding what Trump does, once you see there was a window when he comes and announces it on Saturday and says, like Tuesday morning, there is a window for negotiations. And this is what usually happens. And the idea was this is going to be staged. What I mean by that, that was the first step. So there's a 30 days, and that was given, and the markets, bottomed and came up, and they've kind of discounted the China news right now. But let me go back to tariffs. And I tell you, as a child, I do remember, I was born in Iran, and I remember, tariffs are part of life. That's what happened if we had, people will bring cars from Europe, Mercedes will come. There was
Hmm.
100% tariff. That's why the cars are
Yeah.
very expensive in the Middle East. And and for our audience, you have to know there's 170 countries with tariffs, some sort of tariffs. So when we hear this tariffs, as if like this is like a an animal that has never hit anyone. When you go to Bahamas, well, agricultural products, it's 24% tariffs. Cayman Islands, Bermudas. So those are you get 20% tariffs. So in Africa, there's quite a few countries from Djibouti to other countries, there are tariffs. So even when I travel, I had to, as you know, I had to take care of my parents' estate. I went to Iran. They check, if you have like a Samsung or, you got an iPhone, Apple iPhone in a box, what you have to pay tariffs. So things are actually more expensive for someone who makes $250 or $300 a month in Iran. The iPhone is more expensive in dollars than United States. So that's because of tariffs. So tariffs have been around. They are a common thing in many countries. The only truly free non-tariff countries in the world, I'll give you some names, is Singapore, Hong Kong, and then we look at Macau, which is an island of China, and then Switzerland. Iceland has small amount on products and agriculture, but it's zero on other things. So you see, majority of countries, they have some sort of tariffs. UK has under 1%, and Norway has 0.6%. So there's a lot of countries have that. So it is with President Trump. This is my thinking. He is, again, he's a wheeler dealer. he had planned all this. Of course, he had mentioned this. He's been, his Chinese sanctions, they stayed, not sanctions, I mean the tariffs, and President Biden actually continued. So there has been that continuation of tariffs. The reason he has the upper hand, and I tell, for our international audience, United States has 4% of the world population, but it has 25% of the world consumption. So the world knows that the US is a market. That's his winning hand. And that's why he keeps, bragging, oh, you need us more than we need you. Well, of course we do, especially with Canada. We've had such a great relationship. So I think for, again, our friends in Canada and then also Mexico, what I would say this was the first step. The border and other things, that's what's one thing testing it. I believe started actually yesterday, right after talks. I think he has envoys, especially in Canada, and they're talking about the trades. They're actually talking for the next 25 days or so. So that's going to be ongoing thing. The fairness, and there's also the things in Mexico. All of a sudden, they have 10,000 full-time military, but unfortunately, there's a lot of corruption. That's unfortunate in Mexico with the military and other things. So we'll see how that will go. But this is an ongoing thing. Of course, there's this show, okay, avocados and beer and all that. In the United States, we have the Super Bowl coming. Well, the problem with tariffs and as far as the inflation that's called, it's not just about immediate effect. Okay, avocados goes up, like if it happened today. It's the anticipation, and anticipation, that means that, oh my God, the car's coming from Canada, or the parts are coming from, or the washer and dryer. Do I wait or should I go buy it now when it's cheap? So if he start going buying it, well, because of that, this demand goes up, and then also, well, there's a push on the price because now the companies are smart enough; they know there's a demand, so it becomes a self-fulfilling inflationary. So I would say, let's take a deep breath. I think this is going to be a gradual thing. We will have more heads up. And you see the the Chinese tariffs went to effect bilateral, and the markets are up today. So there's going to be a lot of negotiating going on. One last thing I would talk about is why the Mexican government has been resistant, with the immigration as far as what is going on. They've had the open borders, and I will talk about that. I'd like to spend some time on immigration as an immigrant. So what has happened, the biggest money going back to the country from the immigrants around the world, it comes from Indian population. The Indians around the world, they send about 129 to 130 billion dollars back to their country. But remember, the Indian population is 1.4 billion. From United States, there's about 15 billion or so. It goes back to India. On the other hand, Mexican immigrants, with a population of 129 million in Mexico, last year they sent close to $70 billion. That $70 billion is helping Mexican economy because the dollar is moving from United States, from them to Mexico. And that's what has been, there's not something that nobody talks about, but that's like a underground market in a way that helping the GDP of Mexico. So that's why the more immigrants are in the United States, the better it is for Mexico. By far, that is the largest any immigration population in the United States, by far, close to 70 billion. The next is India, 15 billion. So you see that big gap. So that's one of the things. So I hope that's helpful with the tariffs. Again, tariffs have been around, but never been like this drastic, and there's a lot of attention every day. The media talks about it, and basically, uh, it is going to be staged and staged step by step. So, well, let's watch it for the next 25 days. Another advantage President Trump has in the United States, besides the other things, is, you know, Prime Minister Trudeau is not a very popular or strong leader in Canada. So that's also something that the Canadian population has to work. He resigned, so you don't have really at this moment somebody who can actually have the talk. So he's got the upper hand on that as well. But I believe at the end of the day, such a close relationship between the United States and Canada. Things will work out, but it will be a little more level. I mean, there's another talking about tariffs. There's another suggestion was it goes back to military. Like President Trump comes and tells Ukraine, okay, we're going to give you an aid, but this bilateral, this is a unilateral aid, and Europe is not doing as much. Well, we need rare earth. China has been very smart for many, many years. They've been around the globe, from Central Asia to Africa to Latin America. They got their hands everywhere, and they are getting natural resources from all over the world at a big discount. They've been investing in infrastructure of those countries as far as mining goes. And so the United States is saying, well, hey, Greenland, we could use some of the help. They're not going to go take over, but right there's a Danish government is open now. And then Ukraine, well, we need some rare earth. We give you some aid, you give us some of that. So it's all negotiations. It's all wheel and deal. So we'll see. I mean, next 30 days will be interesting. I think we just have to, again, not react immediately. I mean, I cannot go buy avocados, like 1,000 of them, and just put them in my pantry. What am I going to do? It's going to go bad. So what? I can do it for a week or something. So there's going to be a lot of, I don't drink beer, but if somebody is having beer, well, maybe they can store it. I don't know how long it lasts, but anyway, so that's as far as the tariffs. But I
Okay,
think it's
I'm just going to stop you for a second.
Sure.
We have quite a few people watching live, and so I would love for the people who are watching live, if you're coming in, especially on the YouTube channel, there's a place there for you to comment or ask questions. So if you have comments or questions, just feel free to put them out there, and we can post those for Dr. Ramin to address or to talk about. So just want to say that. So thank you for the watchdog next 30 days. And you're right, I'm not going to buy a whole bunch of bananas.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing.
Okay. And put them in the fridge, no. But just on the Canadian side of things, just so you know, there have been huge amounts of sites created on Facebook and other social media about Buy Canadian. And so people are busy. What normally would take them an hour to go grocery shopping is now taking 4 hours because they're looking at all the labels. So there's made in Canada or product of Canada, which means ingredients made in Canada. They could be coming from somewhere else, but product of Canada. And people are actually on there looking for alternatives. So like, what's a great Canadian skincare product?
Mhm.
What's a great Canadian cereal? Who knows what meats are, so there's all this that is, because the average consumer is being impacted and will be impacted. So just to let you know a little bit of what's happening on the Canucks side of things as it relates to the tariffs. Back to you.
Yeah, no, it's important to know. Of course, the biggest thing when we talk about Canada is obviously the oil and the natural resources.
Natural
and of
resources.
Course,
yes.
the electricity, it affects our northern, midwestern, and northern states in the United States. It doesn't affect someone in Florida, for instance. But again, there's a reciprocal. There's the orange juice and other things, and then like a dairy products from Canada, for instance. And so I think that will be again, we watch for the next 25 days. That will be, there's a lot of interchangeable things because we're talking about a lot of cars manufactured in Canada, for instance. Now, there's obviously uh, the idea is like a Chevy, Ford, they all between Canada and Mexico. So what are we going to do with that? So there's a long-term planning, but these are all negotiating power. And one suggestion have been made in regards not to Mexico. Mexico is pretty, I think, simple because they need a lot more from United States than United States needs from Mexico. So the first order was let's stop the border crossing and fentanyl. Um, but I think with our Canada, there has been a suggestions to maybe we should wait and hold to have a new government with more clarity. So that why you are negotiating with someone who is more, at least more powerful in there and has maybe more backing from the Canadian population than unfortunately is very fragmented right now. At least that's my observation. So there are those thoughts. So I'm sure, as I said, next 30 days, 25 days, those play a role. So we'll see if that's something, but there will be something happening. I'm not going to discount that. There will be some definitely negotiating, um, and we'll see what happens. But that's another suggestion. So maybe wait 70 days or so till we'll see what Prime Minister Trudeau, there's a replacement. Somebody has made a decision. So, right. So yeah. So I welcome anyone's comments or questions, but that's my 2 cents. As I said, tariffs. I mean, you don't see Chevys in Germany, for instance. The Germans put tariffs on U.S. cars. You don't see many U.S. cars. You see them in the Middle East, but not. But we see Mercedes and obviously BMWs in North America. So those are about the fairness, and Europe will be next. So there is already negotiating about Europe to see what's going to happen. So we'll see. Um, and then I'm going to combine that because tariffs obviously is a global thing. It happens a lot. And I was just going to mention, like Japan, for instance, there's 57,000, I think, troops or U.S. troops, protecting, or they're stationed in Japan. Japan doesn't really have a big military, so there's a talks that maybe negotiating and maybe have Japan owns about 1.2 trillion dollars of U.S. debt. Maybe they can forgive that. The U.S. protects them. So there's a lot of little things we have to see. There's going to be a give and take. So one thing I can tell you, and I mentioned it in our uh, I did have a webinar, over the weekend. We talked about the market's outlook for 2025, and it was really fun to have. We had people from Central Europe, UK. We had people from New York to Kansas, obviously from Canada and California. Uh, One of the things I did mention, this was, last week we had the Chinese Lunar Year, and this is the year of the wooden snake, and definitely it's a year of transformation, but also lots of volatility. So it has been kind of just in the last few days. I think we had the whole year of volatility summarized in 1 or 2 days. So this is going to be that type of a year. So just for people who follow the zodiac signs. But anyway, let's discuss something which is endear to me. And this whole tariff things also, where did they start? Not only from the economic point of view, but it was about immigration. Okay, and open borders, the idea was, well, why Canada? How much drugs comes from Canada versus Mexico? And, that the thought was a lot of terrorists who arrived in the United States they came from actually northern borders rather than southern borders. So there's like a lax immigration policy in Canada, especially coming from Middle East. So the idea was to use that as a, again, negotiating tool. But immigration is important to me because of, you know, I was an immigrant. And when we think about immigration, and the idea is not politicizing things, because I feel this is more of a fact based. When we think about liberals and Democratic Party in the United States, so I'm not talking about Tories, or I'm not talking about in Canada, or in UK or England, but in United States, we think about liberalism as compassionate, as someone that who really cares about average person, and the things you've been seeing on TV through the media is all the Democrats are crying for the immigrants, whether it's legal, illegal. The whole purpose is the illegal immigration, or the immigrants, not the legal. So the idea is, I was an immigrant and I came as a student. And I do remember, late President Carter, who was the longest living president in US history. Um, what happened was, he came to Iran in 1977 and told the Shah of Iran, which, Iran was a very stable country. It was a fantastic country, and from the tourism, from a strategical point of view, it was very powerful, and told Iran, the Shah, that the US has its back and nothing is gonna, they will be there for many, many years. They're so proud to have the allies. And I do remember it, because in those countries, it doesn't happen in Canada, it doesn't happen in the United States or Western Europe, but in a lot of emerging developing countries, when you have a major leader visiting you, they ask all the students, go on the streets and wave flags and welcome them, right? So it's like a big deal. Happens in North Korea. It's like, oh, that Kim Jong-un, or it's like, oh, he's coming, it's going to be driving by, let's close the schools. And so I remember the exact day when it was happening, the dinner. But guess what happened? A year and a half later, the Shah of Iran left Iran. We had a revolution in Iran. And, of course, we had the Islamic Republic now. It has been there since 1979. And the Shah of Iran came, he had cancer, uh, which he's been hiding it. And then he came to the United States, went to New York, ended up going to Houston. And President Carter ordered that he should leave. He should leave the United States in the interest of the relationships with Iran. And then the hostages were taken. So obviously the Shah of Iran goes to Panama, goes to Bahamas, Panama, and he ended up going to Morocco. And he went to Egypt, and he died. He passed away at age 60 or 59 or 60. He was very young, actually, and he passed away. And the only person from United States, the only leadership, was President Nixon, who stood by him. Everyone else, who was a big ally of United States, the United States, according to some, CIA helped to bring Iran up. And so Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt, and there was the President Carter, the Middle East, the peace deal with Menachem Begin from Israel, Anwar Sadat, Egypt. That was like a big breakthrough. Imagine Egypt and Israel, and they won the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And Anwar Sadat opened his arms because they were friends with Shah. And a year later, Anwar Sadat was assassinated. And one of the reasons was because by Islamic radicals, because he opened his arms for Shah and also dealing with Israel. The whole reason I bring this, politics is unfortunately looks at the self-interest. And that's why I know President Carter after his presidency, he was a very nice person. He did a humanitarian, but he was he was liked by the people around the world than being respected. So I, as an immigrant, and this is, again, it's a personal, I just want to share it. I'm sure we have some immigrants in our audience. When the hostages were taken, 100,000 students were round up, all legal. We were all in America legal. It was in my first year of college, 18 years old, and we all being deported. And basically, I never forget that day. I was given 6 months to actually leave the country, and I had no way of, I couldn't go back to my own country. We had a revolution, and I'm in university, and basically, I had actually two friends who did go back, and they disappeared. I mean, the parents never saw them when they came off the plane. So the idea is this, that there's heartless, there's deportations, and the immigration is, under democratic powers, is a lot more friendly. Well, it's not. And when we look back, we see that, we got to look at things fairly. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about, what history tells us, what the actions have told us. When we think about friends, being liked versus respected, I think we as uh, even children, we try to be liked, but more importantly, we like to respect our parents. We like to respect our teachers. We like to respect our coaches. As a coach, when I was coaching, I've been coaching for 45 years. If I'm coaching 6 or 7 or 8 year olds, I am in a different manner. I coach them differently than when I was coaching high school kids, 14, 15, 16 year olds, because as a coach of 6 or 7 year olds, I want them to fall in love with sports. I want them to like the sport. So I want them to be happy in those moments. When you're 15 or 16 year olds, you already made up your mind. That's what you want to do. So they want guidance. They want someone who's going to give them uh, uh, points to learn. And it doesn't matter if you're tough on them, they just want to improve. So that's what the time is. There's a time for being liked, there's a time to being respected. And I think a lot of times, as human beings, as leaders, we should be striving at being respected, especially when it comes around the globe. um, Working with some tough leaders who brought up with having their own way, and a lot of dictators around the world, they look at that. So um, going back, I would look at again and look at the politics of the things. When you look at, again, when you think about the major wars around in our United States history in the past 100 years, we see that we entered World War One, which was justified. So I don't have to say it's nothing to do against any party. But in 1917, it was President Woodrow Wilson who actually won, again, Nobel Prize. U.S. entered to World War One under a Democratic president. Uh, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, actually was a Democrat. We ended up World War II. Again, that was justified, but it happened after the invasion by Japanese. Um, the atomic bomb actually fell on Japan under President Truman, a Democrat. Korean War started under President Truman, a Democrat, and it was finalized by President Eisenhower, a Republican. The Vietnam War started during President Johnson, a Democrat, and it ended by President Nixon in 1975 or so. 1973, 74, when he was pulling out, and President Ford finalized it. And then, of course, we had the Persian Gulf the First with Saddam Hussein. It was a very short war under President Bush the First. We had Serbia, and that was, again, humanitarian under President Clinton, a Democrat. President Bush was a Republican. And the Cold War ended, again, under President Reagan and President Bush. And that was also basically, again, that was a Republican. the Iraq War, and I would say, President Bush II, there were war hawks around him, and basically they really forced this whole thing with Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, Dick Cheney comes into the picture, some other interests. So that was a Republican which continued for a long time, and of course, we come forward, and of course, now you have Ukraine and Russia. So the reason I say this is there's this misconception that just because somebody's liberal Democrat has this compassion towards immigrants. And when we think about Japanese concentration camps, that was during, again, President Roosevelt. So this idea is that we are just put labels. All Democrats are compassionate, Republicans are heartless. We have to look at, again, the history. And one of the things is interesting. Thank God we have so much of information available, so we cannot get away, because it would be easier to check the facts. And I go back to, for instance, when you talk about deportation, everybody's up in arms. So I will ask you, Dr. Laurie, as far as I have a question for you. Who do you think the most deportation happened under which president, do you think? If you had to guess.
I would say Ronald Reagan.
Good. Okay. So that's the perception we have, right?
Yes.
President Clinton deported 12 million immigrants. President Reagan, believe it or not, is responsible for open borders. And he is a conservative icon. But in 1986, they did have this Immigration Act. And I don't know if you remember, there was a Haitian uprising. There was boat people from Haiti. It was a compassionate thing. He opened the borders so the Haitians can come. Then he opened, okay, if you have children, you can stay. You can be, you can be a part of it, be a citizen. And so actually, it was President Reagan, which is good or bad. He's responsible. That now that Republicans are like, oh, it's open, but well, it was President Reagan who opened it. But President Clinton deported 12 million. President Obama's nickname became, they call it deporter in chief. That became his nickname. So when we think about, oh, how heartless, like Trump has become this heartless thing, well, there's a lot of history. And when I hear when I see Senator Schumer, for instance, who's the leader of Democratic in Senate, and I hear Nancy Pelosi, the House leader, in 2009, they came out and they said there is no undocumented immigrant. They are illegal and they have to leave. And that's what President Obama started deporting them. So this idea that, this a compassion, it loses its value, because now, thank God, average person like all of us, we have internet. We can go back and check things and say, wait a minute, what happened? This year, we have to have compassionate for these immigrants. They're sending them back. But a few years ago, we were the ones who were saying, well, send them back. So there has to be accountability. And it goes back to, again, that's where the respect comes from, discipline. As a parent, as a teacher, I mentioned, as a coach, children respect because they need to know where they stand and they want consistency. You cannot be this way one day and then another. So you can lie today, you can do this, but next day, you cannot be a liar. Lying is bad. And no, we need consistency, and that's what it lacks in politics. And unfortunately, a lot of times, what we hear from the media is what we are fed. But the good news is there's a lot of power we have. I know you watch KCAL, for instance, which is, I believe, the affiliate of CBS or so. They're good for local news, what is happening with traffic, the weather, but they're outfit of what AP story tells them, and they just read it. They don't do any of their own investigation and other things for
No, no.
national things. So we have to have that unbiasedness. Thank God we are doing things. We have access to a lot of information, and to our friends. I'm an immigrant, but it took me. I was being on deportation list, but I was so fortunate that I was surrounded by such a loving people. At the school, I had I was in Connecticut, and I had these female students that they didn't know me that well. I was a student. I was a good student. I was very active. I was in sports and the government. Actually, I couldn't speak much English, but they were humans, and they were offering to marry me. Those days it was easy. If you marry someone, you get a green card. It doesn't. Nowadays, there's been a lot of abuse, but that could have been part of abuse because it was not the real marriage. So I didn't do it, but I'm saying they were offers. There were a lot of people who supported me. They didn't need to. Here's you. There was Don Imus. I don't know if a lot of it in New York. He was a famous disc jockey. It was on the radio. Everybody would listen in the 1980s to Don Imus, and then Howard Stern came right after him or during his time. And Don Imus, he would play this song, Barbara Ann, by Beach Boys. He had changed it to Bomb, Bomb, Bomb Iran. So there was this whole attitude of anti-Iran. But yet these people, they didn't look at me and my ethnicity. They just looked at me as who I was. So I have so much respect for many Americans. I didn't know many Canadians there. I am so grateful because they are in their heart. They are not this think of, they are racist or they ethnicity and other things. Those are my experiences. And I was in a Yankee state, they still didn't like Southerners, but anyway. But what happened was, it took me 10 years. I was very fortunate. I had a great immigration judge. He was from Philippines, and he allowed me to work. And that was the biggest gift I had. I was paying more in Social Security as a 19-year-old than people who had a full-time job because I was working so hard. I had no money. And I am proud of that. That was the best lesson. It was not my degree. It was that ethical work habits that it made me who I am today. And in 1980, it took me 14 years. I became a citizen. It was, never forget, Valentine's Day, which is coming in 10 days. I became American citizen. And besides birth of my children, it was the most amazing day of my life because I finally got an identity. So the question is, the definition of the illegals, there are a lot of nice people, and I know, but the idea is, I went through the channels. My sister-in-laws, we applied for my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. There were 7 of them. It took them 15 years for their paper to go through, finally to be able to come to the United States. So if I have to wait 15 years and somebody just shows up, and just because the border is open, well, that's what the injustice is, I think. Nothing to do with humanity. It's nothing to do. Those are a lot of nice people. As a matter of fact, you go to Middle East, there are these unfortunately bad apples. They get everybody's life savings, promising them we will take you to the United States or we'll take you to Canada, and what they were doing, they would take them to Brazil, to South America. Then they bring them to southern border and let them loose. And they would cross the borders because that's what they thought, this is the best place in the world to live. And that's the problem I have, because I know if you have a gated house and somebody trespasses it or opens the door and just comes to your house, we will not welcome that. So I think that's what they should be, that separation. It's not about being compassionate. It's not about being, it's about the process we have to go through. And as I said, I have known there are many, many nice people who, unfortunately, they are caught in the middle because they came to the United States illegally. So that's what I want to combine. Again, there's a lot of misconceptions about, what party is the compassionate, or it's because somebody's labeled liberal, doesn't mean, it, they are the nicest person. It's like it all depends. It's not about what we say, it's about what we really do. Sometimes for our children or anyone, we talked about uh, many students that you have thought, you show them love, but also you show them the path. One of the best things, I think, last night in our meeting, we talked about independent. One of the amazing things is giving responsibility for younger generation, for anyone. Once you get that responsibility, that's where the self-worth comes. When we are accountable, when we are responsible for things, we feel like a real human, because now we have honor and dignity. When everything is just given to us and now we don't have to earn it, that's where the trouble starts. So just because I love someone, my neighbor, and I give them everything, and they say, "Well, I'm a good person," that doesn't make us a good person. And I know people, I know in audiences, people who have done wonderful things because of their heart. They have helped people, homeless people, and nobody knows about that, because they did it because of the goodness of their heart. That's what we need. So the actions, it was about the actions. It was not about having a megaphone and going out and say, "Oh, how great I am because I sent $20 to this charity. See, I have my check." No. We know some people have billions of dollars and they spend some money or to help charity. We have people who are very poor, but yet still do charitable work. They give their piece of bread and they never expect anything. And that's what the humanity is. And I think the definition, it should not be an identity, it shouldn't be labels, it should be who we are, because we're doing it for our reason, because it's goodness of our heart. And you had a beautiful thing yesterday. You said the soul. It's about our soul. And that's what we need to do. So I talked a lot, but I just needed to get it off my chest. As someone who is this dear to me, talking about immigration, talking about politics, talking about obviously the tariffs. But I hope, at least seeing something from a different point of view. I know it's maybe controversial, but
That's
it is
okay.
what it is. It is
We
who I
don't
am.
mind. It's
And
okay.
and
Well, we have a little question to end the show with,
oh,
and
great.
thank you for all that. It's always wonderful. I cannot talk about being an immigrant because I've never been one. I've been born, raised, worked, educated, everything in Canada.
And
I've traveled a lot, but that doesn't make you an immigrant. That's a totally different experience. And Kathy has a question, though, that, might intrigue us a little because, she works in the disabled community.
sure.
She's hearing impaired. She's made that very public. So she said she wants to know, did you have an easier time in the United States because you may be gifted or smart? What about those who are not so smart? And I know she's asking that question from a place of connecting with the disability community. So, would I be more, I guess the question is, would I be more likely to be accepted because I've got all my faculties or I've made progress on some level? I think that's true. But over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's an excellent question, because now you said I've never been immigrant, and I would say been I haven't been exposed to what challenges obviously Kathy has. But I can tell you one thing, Kathy. When I was at school, what people noticed about me was I was cleaning the floors, I was painting the walls, and they valued that rather than getting my grades, or they didn't say, "Oh, you're the smartest person." I didn't, uh, I'm not a tall person, I'm not overwhelming. It was who I was. They liked me as a person, and that's what made a difference. I couldn't speak much English. uh, there were people who made fun of me, especially in high school, because I was a foreigner. And but there were so many more people who actually protected me. My first day in my public high school, uh, this big guy came and drew a gun at me. I'm like, and I just looked at him, but because I didn't know how to react, I just smiled. And he thought I'm not afraid of him, so we became friends. And then He thought, oh, this guy is cool. Well, I didn't know how to react. I just didn't know. Should I be scared? I mean, he's pulling. Is he gonna kill me? No, and this is in high school bathroom. But what I'm saying is, it's about what we do. And again, I'm not the right person to answer. I've worked with actually one of very close friend of mine. He's a head coach of the disability teams in United Kingdom for 15 years. He's actually his deaf or hearing impairment team. They call it deaf football team over there. They went to the finals in Europe. So he's got. We have some. I've had an encounter with some fantastic people. They're actually speakers. I mean, they come. People follow them. It's just amazing how motivating and inspirational they are. But I was not considered gifted. It was not like people said, "Oh, here he is." No, it was just work ethics. I loved people, and I was in the Rotary Club. I volunteered. That's one thing. From the first day I was in the country, I volunteered. I coached, and I was the youngest Rotary. And I know you have a Rotary story, but I was the youngest member of the Rotary Club and in the leadership at age 23 and in Connecticut. Majority of people were in their 40s. They're all male, of course, and they were all in their 40s and 50s. And here comes a 23-year-old foreigner, and he's taking over. It's like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, and they respected that, and that's how I was getting clients. So I hope that's helpful, Kathy, because again, I have not been there, but I've seen it. My disability might have been because I couldn't speak English and I was a foreigner.
There you go. Well, I think what you're talking about, it has nothing to do with a disability or a limitation. It has everything to do with attitude.
Yeah.
And your approach. You can sit around and feel sorry for yourself and limit yourself because you think. And, last week on the Disability Channel, on the press box, we interviewed Dave Stevens, who was born with no legs.
Right.
He has competed in every sport, football, hockey, soccer. I mean, you name it, he's done it. And he was born that way. He didn't say he was a thalidomide baby, but I'm suspecting because of the generation. But he said, I never knew what it was like to have legs, so I just had to make it work. And he did. And he's now attending this week. He'll be at his 29th Super Bowl.
Yes.
Representing our channel, doing the announcing. He's on Media Way. And yeah, amazing guy. So you know what? It's all up here. What you allow yourself to limit yourself to and use things as an excuse. Look at Helen Keller. Come on. If that wasn't the world's example of someone who did what she needed to do despite all that loss. So yeah, it's all about that. So thank you, Kathy, for bringing that up, and hope that was helpful. She said, yes, that's helpful. Thank you. All right. Okay. Well, any closing remarks, Ramin, leaving our show today? We do this show every Tuesday. We talk about business, politics, finance, upcoming trends. And we have the best person we could possibly have in the co-pilot seat or the pilot seat, really, because Ramin, you do your research. Everything you share is factual. We throw in a few personal views, but we're entitled to those, and that's a good thing. Yes. So thank you so much, Dr. Ramin Modiri, for being our financial guru and the expert in our show on Tuesdays. So tell your friends, if anybody's wondering about tariffs or money or business, tell them to go to YouTube. Check us out, the Dr. Laurie Davis Show. Every Tuesday, we talk like this. So we can get him to talk about other things too, but we'll save those for a special event. All right. So anything else, Ramin, before we leave? Just words of encouragement or anything else you want to share with our audience today?
No, I think we were just talking about just living one day at a time and be grateful for every single day, whether it's minus 30 degrees, which it takes a lot of challenge, but we're just so grateful. One tidbit on the month of February is generally very volatile and not very good for stock market. So just be aware of that. That's from investing point of view. But be
Awesome.
safe, be healthy, and be well.
Absolutely.
Next week.
All right. Bye for now. Talk
Bye
to
bye.
everybody later. Thank you for tuning in. Our pleasure to have you here today on the Dr. Laurie Davis Show, coming to you from the Disability Channel, who are in full bore attendance at the Super Bowl
Yes.
and also Invictus Games at the same time. Oh my goodness sakes. All right. So our guys at headquarters are very busy right now, and we'll be doing some catch up with them because we're going to do some post shows on how that all went.
Excellent.
So bye for now.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you.